Hi guys, this is John Anderson with Ragdoll Animation Studios. Today I want to show you how to interactively set up a controller that controls the rotor speed of this helicopter, both the main rotor and the tail rotor. So initially you can see that there is a controller already on here that controls the rotation. The problem with this controller is that it's on a slider and that it has a beginning and an end limitation. So in order to set this up so that it was continuously rotating, we would have to find the start point, make a 360-degree revolution, keyframe that, set up an out of range type, and then and have it continuously rotate. The problem with that is that it doesn't allow you to interactively adjust the speed. So you couldn't start the helicopter and have it start slowly and then ramp up. So that's not going to work for our purposes. We want to give the user more control. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this rig that has previously been designed, and then we're going to break the rig for the main rotor and the tail rotor. So let's get started. So initially I just want to select the main rotor and I want to take a look and see how the rotation constraint was set up. So if I go to the motion panel, I expand the rotation controls there. I can see that there's an orientation constraint on here. I want to get rid of that, so I'm going to go ahead and just selecting rotation. I'm going to select assign controller and I'm going to add a Euler XYZ. Okay, so that gives us full control now over this rotor. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to reset its orientation to 0, 0, 0, 0. So 0, 0, 0. Okay. And you can see that there is a bounding box around here, and the bounding box looks a little strange. It's kind of crooked, and I want to make sure that that is reset so that it doesn't cause problems later. So what I'm going to do is go up to the Utilities panel, and I'm going to select Reset X Form, hit Reset Selected, deselect Reset X Form, and then I'm just going to, you can see that it applied a modifier on top of the object. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse that by right clicking and converting to editable poly. And we can see that the bounding box here is now square, or now rectangular, so it looks fine. And I think that that'll prevent any issues later on. Alright, if I select and I rotate here, I can see that it is rotating fine. If you look down here, you'll see that it's rotating on Y. So that's actually important to note. I'm going to select gimbal and try that again and make sure that it's still rotating on Y. It's not. It's rotating on Z. So that's actually the axis that we're going to set up our rotation for, is on Z. So I'll go back to view. And then the next thing I want to do is go ahead and create a helper, basically, a controller that we can use to manipulate the rotation speed. So I'm going to go into my create panel. I'm going to select text. I will drag out a new text and I'll call that where are my parameters? I'll just call that rotate tail rotor. Okay. Actually, I'm going to call that rotor speed. That text was there, obviously, because of the previous, when this was last created. There was some default text there. So I'm just going to give it a rotor speed controller. And then I will collapse those. And then up in animation, I'm going to select parameter editor. I'm going to name this speed. and then I will expand my float UI options. I'll select 0 to 10, and then we're going to leave it on spinner. Slider is really good if you want to, there's a couple reasons why you might use slider. First, if your range is 0 to 1, then you're going to be working on decimal places in the tens, the tenths. And what's going to happen is that you're only going to get, with the spinner, you're only going to get 10 different settings. With a slider, you can actually get an unlimited number of different settings because it allows you to extend your decimal place out into the hundredths and thousandths spot. With the spinner, you're not going to get that option. It only allows you to extend your decimal place into the tenths. So. But that's okay because we're going to work from 0 to 10 and we'll be fine. So we're going to choose spinner, 0 to 10. We're going to add that, and you can see that down here it's been added as there's a speed controller that we can control interactively. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to assign a name to this controller. We already have rotor speed, but we want to, it's still defaulting to text 001, so we want to call this rotor speed. Okay, so that's set up. The next thing we want to do is add a helper. So I'm just going to go into my create panel. I'll go to helpers. I'll select a dummy, and I'm just going to drag out a dummy here. And I'm going to align this to the rotor. I'll drag it up so that I can see it. And we're going to basically, when we're all said and done, we're going to link this rotor to this dummy, and then that should allow us to control the angle of the rotor using this dummy. So I will now select, actually I'm going to name this dummy, and I will call this rotor angle. So now I'm going to select the rotor, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a float expression to this rotor. So I will go back into my motion panel. We had already determined that it was rotating on the Z rotation axis. We can reconfirm that now by selecting gimbal. Select gimbal and just watch down here to see which number is changing, and it's the Z rotation. That seems pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it can be different. So I'll expand my rotation in the motion panel, and then I'll select Z rotation. I'll go to assign controller. I'll select a float expression, hit OK, and that'll bring up this dialog box here. Now we're gonna assign rotation over seconds. So you can see down here that you have some different options. You have ticks, you have seconds, you have frames, and you have normalized time. Ticks is based on, I believe it's 4,800 ticks per second. I could be wrong about that. Seconds is obviously 30 frames per second. Frames is each individual frame, and NT is normalized time, so that essentially is based on 0 to 1 over the course of the active time segment. So in this case, it would be 0 to 1 over the course of 100 frames. We're going to just use seconds, so I'll type in S up here. I can hit evaluate, and if I play this, you'll see that it's going to spin at a constant rotation. Now, I can also hit debug here, select debug, and I can watch and see where that, what is that number that it's using to create that rotation. So if you had a long expression up here, you can see what the end result of that expression is here. Okay, cool. I'll close that. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to give it a variable speed. So this variable is anything you want to name it. And we're going to name it speed. You'll hit create, and then you'll see that you'll have a scalar down here called speed. Right now that doesn't mean anything. We can add a constant value to that will that we can use up here in our expression, or we can add a variable speed by linking that to this rotor speed up here, which is 0 to 10. So I'm going to go to assign controller, and I will select rotor speed down at the bottom, and I will select object, and then custom attributes and speed. Okay, speed is what we called that custom parameter in the rotor speed controller. So I'm going to hit OK, and now we have the option of multiplying s seconds times our variable speed, and we can hit evaluate. And what's going to happen now is I'm going to hit play, and you're going to see it doesn't do anything at all, and that's by design. So if we stop this, we select rotor speed, and we give ourselves access to that custom attribute there, and then we play it. If we interactively adjust the speed, you can see that we can increase the rotation of the rotor. Right? Awesome. Set that back to 0. And that all looks good. You could set up a more complex expression so that you know exactly how many rotations per second are occurring. For the purposes of this tutorial though, I don't need to do that. What I might want to do is see what it is, the fastest rotation that we get out of this, and see if that works for us. I think it's a little slow for a helicopter, so maybe we'll add a multiplier in here. So we could multiply it by 2 to get something that's twice as fast. We could try 4, something that's 4 times as fast. We'll evaluate this, and that looks a little better. So if I were to rotate this and see how that looks, I think that looks pretty good. You put a motion blur on that, and I think we're going to have something that looks pretty good. So sometimes if this is too fast, this is going to look wonky here. It's not going to look like it's spinning necessarily. So you want to be careful with that, making this be too fast. Alright, so I'm going to close that. I'll go back into my right view, and then the next thing I want to do is link this to this dummy up here. So sometimes this can get a little tricky. We're going to try it and see how it works. So it's pretty simple to link this, but sometimes this orientation will change once we create that link, like so. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go back into my rotation, and I'm just going to reset this to 0, and we should be good. I don't know why it does that, honestly, but it's fine if it does it. Just be aware that it could. And then I will take my dummy and I'll link it to the main body of the helicopter, and I think that we're going to be good now. So we can test play this, and ooh, that looks like crap. Alright. And I think it's probably going to be because if we select gimbal, we're actually rotating on Y. That's fine. So that just means that we have to go back and we have to fix that rotation. So I'll go back into my motion panel. I will change my Z rotation, back to Bezier float, and then I'm going to add a Y rotation. So it's good that you see problems pop up in these tutorials once in a while, because it's nothing to get too concerned about. We just got to see what was wrong, and we have to go ahead and fix it. So I'll go into my Y rotation. I'll select float expression. In here, I'll do the same exact thing. I'll create a variable speed called speed. I'll assign a controller to it. I'll select the custom attribute in that rotor speed, for speed. And then up here, I'm going to select S for seconds multiplied by speed, our variable speed, and then multiplied by 4. And I'll evaluate that. It should play fine, and it does. So I'll close this, and now I should be able to rotate our dummy and have the rotor speed, the rotors move as they're spinning. The pivot is in the center, though. For this dummy, we need it to be low, aligned basically with the rotor, the pivot for the rotor. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my go into my hierarchy panel, effect pivot only, and I'm just going to align this to my rotor. I don't need to change the angle, I just want to align the position. So now if I rotate this dummy, it's going to rotate the rotor. It's going to angle the rotor, I should say. So that's a little better. And then if we play this, so I'll just go ahead and play. Oh, sorry, I'm going to angle this a little bit, and then I'm going to play, and it should still spin fine. Alright, so that's all good. If I move the main body of the helicopter, that should all move with it. It's always good to just test it and make sure. And then I'm going to go ahead and link my controller now to my other controllers, and then I'm going to change the color to kind of match. Oop, not quite there. Let's try this one. Alright, still not quite there. Let's turn off, there you go. Alright, it's good enough. We'll increase the size of this just a little bit. Text, parameters. Alright, so that's essentially how you get the main rotor to work. We still need to fix the tail rotor though, so that it spins as well. The tail rotor, I played with this a little bit earlier, and I tried to do the same thing, and I kept breaking the rig. So what I found though, fairly quickly within a couple minutes, I just I unhid the helpers, and I found that this tail rotor is being controlled by this dummy here. Okay, so if I were to spin this dummy, it spins the rotor. So I don't really have to set up any other dummies or controllers, or change the rotor constraints here, because I know that just by spinning this dummy, I'm spinning the rotor. So all I need to do now is set up an expression that spins this based on this custom attribute up here. So if I am on gimbal and I rotate this, I can see that it's rotating on Y down at the very bottom. Here you can see that number change. Alright, so I'm going to go into my my motion panel. I'll expand my rotation. It's all still set up for Euler XYZ, Bezier floats. I'll select Y. I'll go to Assign Controller, assign my float expression, hit OK. I'm going to assign a variable speed. I'll hit Create. Assign to controller. It's going to be the same controller. Unfortunately, though, I linked that controller to that tail rotor. So I believe it's going to be in one of these sliders. That's unfortunate that I did that, but I think we can find it. There we go. Rotor angle. Well, what the heck? Let's break this. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and break this link. I'll try this again. Custom attribute speed. Alright, that was a pain. Alright, so we have our speed variable. I will select seconds times speed. Oops. And we'll just multiply that by 4 to see if it's the same. Hit evaluate. Close this. Spins fine. I think maybe a little too fast there. So what I want to do is go ahead and go into that float expression. I'll change this to 2. Try that again. That looks a little better. So then what we can do now is we can keyframe this. So if I wanted to, I'm going to go ahead and hide those helpers. I don't need those anymore. If I want to go into my rotor speed, I can hit auto key, go into my modify panel, collapse those, set my rotor speed at 0. I'm going to expand my timeline so that I can ramp up my rotor speed over time. So let's give it about, I don't know, 10 seconds to ramp up. I'll set my key at 0, go to 300, set my rotor speed at 10, and then if I deselect auto key and hit play, you can see the rotors ramp up a little bit. And that looks pretty good. Excellent. So there is an issue here, and it's going to be a limitation with using this method. If the rotors are slower, or if you're doing something else that's a little slower that uses the same kind of principle, once you max out your last keyframe, you're going to see there's going to be a little bit of a dip in the speed of the rotation here, and that has to do with the change in value. Since the rotors are spinning based on this value in your expression changing. The change in value is greater as it's ramping up than once it becomes constant. So here you might be able to see it, but they're spinning fast enough so I don't think you're going to. Once the scrubber hits 300, you might see this slow down just slightly. So I could see it's not noticeable. It's not that noticeable. Definitely, if you're not looking for it, I don't think you're going to see it.